Good evening. I'd like to call the June 17th, 2010 meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission to order. I think we're waiting for our audio visual. Wonderful. We're there. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance and ask our clerk, Jennifer Schmidt, please to lead us in that. Thank you, Jennifer.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we typically start with presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the commission. We do not have any requests to speak at this time. So we'll move on to consideration and approval of the minutes from the June 3rd, 2010 Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Moore.
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes of
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Ledesma. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed and abstentions. Mr. Galvan, okay, abstains, thank you. We'll move on to approval of the agenda order. I believe this is a pretty simple one with one item, so we will move to correspondence and staff communications from the city planner, please. Mr. Riccola.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Last night, the City Council met and considered the changes to the zoning ordinance that were previously before the Planning Commission. Those changes involved manufactured home parks, temporary signs, and massage. That item is going to be considered by the City Council in a public hearing on July 7th. And there is only one piece of correspondence before you tonight, and that is the PowerPoint on agenda item number 1. And just as a reminder, there is no Planning Commission meeting on the 1st of July, so our next regularly scheduled meeting will be the 15th of July. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Riccola. We'll move on to the disclosure of ex parte communications. Any commissioners have communications? Sure. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the public workshop on the OPDE solar project. Mr. Tilley.
Before Mr. Tilley
sorry.
begins, Mr. Tom Sheeler with the Port of Sacramento will like to say a few words, and then David Tilley will give the staff report, Madam Chair.
Wonderful, thank you. Welcome.
Hello, Tom Sheeler, Port of West Sacramento, and also on the city staff. Good evening. I'm here to basically just say a few words. OPD approached the port some time ago and talked about locating the solar array project on port property on the west side of the ship channel. Port was very interested in the project as it represented a renewable green energy project within the city boundaries and within the port property. So we began discussions and have had very productive discussions with OPDE. Represents, as I said, a very good green project, a good renewable green energy project. Offers power production that would be equivalent to that used by over 5,000 California homes, and represents a very significant lease revenue to the Port of West Sacramento. So it's important, certainly, to the port for a revenue opportunity. So we are very supportive of the project and look for your consideration for it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Tilley.
Yes, good evening, Ms. Sandine, members of the Planning Commission. We are here tonight in a workshop format on the OPD solar project, as Mr. Sheeler mentioned. This is a project that we anticipate coming before the Planning Commission in a public hearing next month. So we appreciate the Commission entertaining a workshop on the project tonight so that the public hearing that we anticipate for July 15th can remain on schedule. As was mentioned in your staff report, this is a very large solar project, total of 24 megawatts. As Todd mentioned, it provides power roughly the equivalent of 5,000 homes, so it puts it in somewhat perspective. To generate the 24 megawatts, be over 1,900 solar trackers placed over 4 sites along the alignment of the project. This meets our city's definition of major impact services and utilities, and therefore is a conditional use in all zones. And as Tom alluded to as well, we ultimately need to execute a lease with the port for that property, since this is port-owned property. We'll describe, I'll have some more graphics to show, but I want to also describe it verbally. These solar trackers will be located to adjacent to and actually east of the navigation levee of the Deepwater Ship Channel. Want to make it specific that they're actually not on the levee itself, but they would be waterward of the levee structure. And some of the plans that you've received in your packet should illustrate that. But there's been some misconception and even some of our own internal work about, these are, although they're going adjacent to the levee, they're not actually on the levee itself. And also another part of the project why we wanted to workshop it for tonight is a little unusual is that two of the sites are located wholly within the city limits. One of the sites actually straddles the city limit with Yolo County and south end, and the fourth site is actually located wholly within Yolo County. County, however, has deferred its lead agency status to the city, so the city will be processing all the entitlements, environmental review, and the building permits for the project. This graphic here at the scale we're talking about, I realize is a little difficult to see, but this exhibit's in your packet as well. To put it in context and scale, I've sort of highlighted in the yellow blobs there towards the top and the middle of the page the 4 sites where these are located, and these revised plans have added the Bridgeway Lakes and Bridgeway Island neighborhoods in them for a little more perspective to show where these 4 are located. And again, these are actually on the west side of the Deepwater Ship Channel, adjacent to the west levee, but on the waterward side. This is one of the visuals that's part of OPD's materials, but it kind of shows an illustration of the trackers themselves and how they could be oriented, similar to what is proposed at this location. Each tracker has been described as being roughly as big as a 3-car garage, kind of to put it in perspective. This is a detail of one of the 4 sites. They're all very similar. The trackers are aligned within each one of these, so they're roughly the same size. So about a quarter of the trackers would be at each site. They're all oriented similarly. The trackers are oriented north-south, and they can rotate on the axis depending on the time of year to maximize the solar accessibility for the trackers. One of the main issues with a project of this size, which totals almost 160 acres, is really the visuals of the trackers themselves. And so this is a line of sight exhibit. The houses and street you see on the right side is the Bridgeway Lakes neighborhood. And what this is attempting to show as a cross section on towards the bottom of the diagram indicates the relative elevation of the homes there, their pad elevations, the height of the levee on the east side, and also was important from a visual standpoint, illustrates the horizontal distance across the levee down the other side, across the channel, and back up the levee on the west side. It's almost a quarter mile all the way across from the homes in Bridgeway Lakes and Bridgeway Island to the north, across the Deepwater Ship Channel, and onto the levee on the other side where the trackers would be located. The levee elevation is approximately 30 feet. These trackers we placed at the proposed pad elevation of about 27 feet. And the homes in Bridgeway Lakes and Bridgeway Island, the pad elevations are really around between 10 and 12 feet. So based on these illustrations and the relative grades, we would not expect the trackers to be visible even from second-story windows along the homes that are on the west side of Bridgeway Lakes or Bridgeway Island. Certainly they would be visible for anyone who is standing on top of the levee on the east side, but for day-to-day views, we would not expect the trackers to have little to no visibility from those neighborhoods. And the Site 1, which is the most northerly site, is west of the Bridgeway Lakes neighborhood. The remaining sites are all south and go quite a ways down the channel. We took a drive out there some time ago, and it's quite a ways to go all the way down to the south end of the trackers, and that's an area deep down into the county where there's mostly agriculture and very little residential development. We have prepared a mitigated negative declaration on this project. We'll be seeking your action on that when the public hearing rolls around. That was actually just released last week, and there's a comment period is now ongoing. Will run through July 9th. We'll be providing the comments and responses to those comments to the commission at the upcoming hearing. We don't have the kind of normal impacts in this type of project because it's an unmanned facility, so we don't have traffic impacts and we don't have noise impacts, at least by the time operation of the facility comes along. But based on the site location, there is some potential for impacts, and the most sensitive one of those are related to habitat. This is obviously adjacent to the bypass, and this is an area where there is significant sensitive species, many bird species, pond turtle, and burrowing owl and others that have nesting sites here, or primary and giant garter snake, another one. So those are we have many impacts. We do have mitigation measures for all of them, and those are explained in the negative declaration. Many of these are more construction related and therefore are short-term nature. And we have a very extensive biological section because this area in total is a very rich with biological diversity and many, not only many species, but many sensitive status species. So that's kind of an overview of the project. Tonight we would like to seek any comments and questions you may have for us and from the audience. The applicant is here tonight also, can help answer questions, and so will Tom. So with that, I'd like to close my presentation and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. And this is a public workshop, so we'll take comments and questions. There are no requests from the public to speak at this time. Applicant, if the applicant would like to, available for questions? Okay, thank you. Questions from the commission? I do have one, but I wanted to give you a chance. Okay, Mr. Liebig.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. I do have several questions. Where is the negative declaration for this? Did others get it in their packet? Am I the only one that didn't, or?
No, we did not provide it to the commission at this time. It just hit the street.
Okay, will we get it before the hearing?
Yes.
Okay,
We can
thank you.
provide that to you.
And then one thing you mentioned was that these would not be visible from the homes, but on attachment number 4, the schematic seems to contradict that. The bottom, the very, very bottom of attachment 4. Though the pad elevation is at elevation 27, the actual arrays are above that and appear to stick above the levees. So I just wanted to point that out, which brings my major consideration would be the visual impact from the houses around, say, Bridgeway Lakes. And then I know I talked about this on the phone with you. You mentioned that you were going to notice homes within 1,000 feet. There are no homes within 1,000 feet from my math. So are we noticing homes at a bigger radius?
The parcels where the notification is based on actually includes, the channel itself. So it will pick up, and we have a stack of envelopes, yay thick. So we will pick up numerous homes within the Bridgeway Lakes and probably Bridgeway Island neighborhood. We have that already.
My biggest concern is actually the houses that back up, of course, to the levee, because they are looking out that direction. And many of them probably bought the property thinking that they're going to be looking out over the channel, then onto the bypass, which won't be developed. So this may be a bit of a surprise to them to see this coming. So I want to make sure we hear from anybody who's interested to talk about that. I am excited about the project. Not to harp on all of my concerns, I am excited about this project, and seeing the port continue to go green, I think is a step in the right direction for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liebig. Other comments? Mr. Moore?
I actually just have a couple of comments I'd like to make. And some of it, actually, I had the visual line of sight question also. And David, I think maybe when you come back, it would be interesting if we had a visual of a photograph going out with a board of how high it's going to be, so we can tell if in fact it is a visual impact out there or not. I'm good at visuals, I'm not good at maybes or shouldn'ts. One of the things that they talked about is the site's going to be unmanned, is that correct? I think if you're going to answer,
Yep.
Madam Chairman, I mean, he's
Thank
going to
you.
have to do it, because there's probably millions of people out in our television audience that are waiting to hear your response. But I got the idea that it was unmanned from David, but I was talking to somebody that does a lot of these, and it takes quite a bit of maintenance, because you're constantly cleaning and,
There is a full-time staff. For a project this size, there'll probably be 12 people that'll be working to maintain it. They won't be stationed on site, but they will be there probably on a daily basis.
well, and then
I mean, is that,
that's fine. And I mean, without seeing the other report, I'm not quite sure how you're going to accommodate these people out there, or what we're going to, is there going to be a building of some type, or?
we don't expect to have any maintenance facility out there. We have our shop and office is only about 2 miles
Well, I
from.
was thinking like bathrooms and,
There'll
stuff
definitely
like
need to
that.
be temporary bathroom facilities out there for sure.
I guess I haven't seen how the project's built. I don't understand how you're building it. So my question would be, I would have to assume, as big as these are, we're going to have to dig down in the ground and cement these things into the ground?
These actually are ballasted. The biggest problem with these arrays are uplift from the wind. So these are actually concrete ballasts that are poured on top of the surface.
Oh, so
So
we
there's no
don't dig
penetration at all.
into the surface?
There'd be some penetration for conduits, normal trenches, 30-inch conduits, and that's it.
Okay. And I guess, David, my question after that is the fact, have we run this past the Corps of Engineers and told them what we're looking at out here? And if we haven't, I think we probably should, so that we're not affecting any of our monies.
I know that Tom has been in touch with the Corps of Engineers, and they're also reviewing the environmental document. So they actually need approval from the Corps to do this project in the end.
Okay, well, I think it's important. I guess I was reading your letter, and I guess I didn't understand this because I'm not electrical. Ron is our electrical guy. He'll understand all this. On the back of your document that you sent to us, it was talking about, I'm trying to see exactly where, I should have marked this closer, but it was talking about this facility would service 5,000 homes?
Be producing electricity that would be consumed by 5,000 homes, typical California homes.
Which is obviously a great thing. But then right below it, it said it was like 10 times the amount that we would use in our entire city.
I think the comment came from the city staff, and I think that more refers to the city buildings, not the residences in the city.
Okay. And I guess my only other question is, if the power's there, how do we get the power out of there?
There are actually existing connection points that cross the channel right now, just south of our project. There's a connection point to the west in Davis, about 3 miles, and it's about at the very north end of the site. There's an interconnection point that we're proposing with PG&E. So we've already got the preliminary feasibility status from PG&E. They're working on their interconnection process right now.
I don't know what that means, though. I mean, are we going to run a wire across the deep water channel?
No, we'll be using the existing wires. There is an existing overhead crossing of the Deepwater Channel now that will handle about half the power. And then we're talking to PG&E about routing the other half north through the industrial area of West Sacramento on existing transmission lines that are there.
And I guess all this is going to be laid out to us a little bit in our next
Well,
document that we're going to see.
Well, the interconnection, I can provide some more detail from the interconnection plan if you'd like.
Oh, I was just curious how it was all going to work. I mean, this is a very generic type, here's what our proposal is. I'm like Mr. Liebig. I mean, I think this is a great idea. I just want to make sure it works.
Yeah,
Because I would think that you would underground anything you were doing. I didn't
for the most
understand.
part on site, we'd like to underground. We're actually trying to avoid underground where we need to for sensitive species, but also for cooling. These, underground lines with a system this size do have a lot of heat. So actually, above ground is a better, more efficient use for our type of system. But the PG&E will provide, in their interconnection agreement, they're the ones that will provide the specs on what's required, what we have to pay for upgrades, what changes would need to be made.
Okay, and then just my last question. If we decide we're going to have an overground or an above-ground wire, have we, this is actually probably a port question because you don't know the answer to this. I don't know the answer, but I know we're getting more and larger ships into the port. Is that going to affect it, and should we be thinking about that wire that goes over the deep water
The existing
channel?
wires, I believe, is about 150 feet above the channel.
I don't know how big a boat is. You know, I mean, that was my only other question. If it has to go above it, do we need to even look twice at that? I don't know how big
No,
of it.
the existing high-tension wires are sufficiently high for even the larger vessels that we would anticipate. But really, the deepening project anticipates loading the larger vessels that are already calling upon the port to a deeper depth. So we really don't see that a Panamax-class vessel is going to continue coming in.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you looked at it, but I was just making doubly sure that the ports got their comment. I think that's my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Other questions, comments? Mr. Morzini?
I have a few. Thank you. I agree that this is an exciting project. It'd be great for the city to land it because of the visibility with the photocells and everything. And I have to warn you, I do have a background in this area, not with solar, but with power. And most of my questions are going to have to do with that. But first of all, I would agree with Commissioner Moore regarding a visual. We've had some projects like highway signs and things where the presenter will produce an elevation type view where you could actually superimpose your photovoltaic system on a photograph, say, of the landscape, because I think trees play a part here too. There are a lot of trees on that side of the channel, and as far as shielding this, I think people will be excited to look at it from a distance. If it doesn't catch their eye, it's kind of like the wind turbines and that sort of thing. So I think that would give us a better look. You did, though, indicate that you're going to have another crossing, and that crossing now, I believe at PG&E, it's a 12,000 volt line that crosses the channel, and then as soon as it crosses on the east side of the channel, it goes underground, and it goes underground all the way to the substation there. And with 24 megawatts of capacity, you're probably going to need 3 or 4, actually 4 circuits if you're going to bring it all, if you're going to tie it all to that substation at that voltage. And I think it's really important that we get to see what you're talking about, because another crossing, if you're talking about another crossing, that's an expensive process, whether it's overhead or underground. And I think by going north, maybe you can eliminate tying into or crossing the channel. The further north you go, that you get beyond the channel at some point. But in the city, we have the Planning Commission has an authority to make a recommendation to the council regarding utilities, be it overhead or underground. And since these are distribution voltage lines, traditionally they would be underground. And as you know, once that crossing crosses into the developed part of West Sacramento, they are underground. And seeing the magnitude and the cost, $145 million project, the cost of undergrounding those lines within the city limits, and naturally part of your project is south of the city limits, I would think that it would be prudent to at least evaluate the cost of that. It would probably be less than 0.5% of the cost of your project. And I'm just guessing that, but at $145 million for 24 megawatts, that's about $6 million a megawatt. So this is expensive. This is a very expensive per kilowatt project that you're working on. So I would like to see something regarding that, because the array is going to be one thing to look at, but the power lines are going to be taller than that system, and that's on our western horizon. A lot of people look out there, and whether or not the photo cells were placed in that location, those poles are going to be there, and they're going to be much higher than the photo cells would be.
Well, it is our intention to avoid a second crossing. That's what we're trying to do, use the existing crossing and then go through the city, through the existing power lines that are there already, to the extent we can. If we cannot get all the power through those two ways, then we have a southern connection point that goes through Davis, through a substation in Davis, that'll take the power across the causeway.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, you're in the unincorporated area once you start heading west, and, that wouldn't be under our jurisdiction, but this project within the city limits, I think the capacity you're talking about is doable, and even though you're right, you don't get the air cooling, but for a 24 megawatt capacity, there are probably about 3 circuits of underground is going to be required for something like that too. And although you're acknowledging that you're going to have underground from each generation facility to the distribution point, that kind of indicates that that's a feasible thing to do. So I'd like to see that. And then regarding the trees, are you planning on having to remove trees in this project?
There are a few trees in the southernmost project site, Site 4. Most of the sites have very few trees already. Site 1 and 2, the northmost sites, are going to require a lot of fill and grading. Not a lot of trees in those 2 sites. Site 3 has no trees to speak of right now. So Site 4 is the one that would have the impacts to trees.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess my final question or 2 more questions. One, having to do with the negative declaration, that is, I wouldn't call it, well, it's a Vic Fazio wildlife area is due west of you, and a lot of migratory birds and that sort of thing, and their impacts with overhead power lines and those, and I would hope that would be addressed in a negative declaration. And then my final question would have to do with public access. And please don't say Homeland Security would prevent, at some date, the public from accessing that area. And I would hope that this project in and of itself will not be cause a restriction for public access, because that corridor along our west city limits has tremendous potential for recreation. And I would personally hate to see this project impede the ability for the city to develop that area. So I'd like to see some sort of answer towards future public access to the area. And with that, I'd like to thank you and wish you good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Morzini. Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, Chair Sandine. Just a couple of comments. First, excited about the project and about what it could bring to the city and to the port as a power source for the community, as well as a revenue source for the port. I think the 2 biggest things that I'm just going to echo from a couple of comments is, one, is I was concerned about the noticing process as well. So David, just to echo Commissioner Liebig's concern, making sure the residents along the back end of the levee have an opportunity. I think, and they're probably going to show up, so would be, I just want to again echo the need to have a visual photographs. And I'm just thinking of just the line of sight, being able to look across and see a height there, it's going to be far away, so I'm not sure if the horizon line changes or whatever, but we're going to have to probably see some demonstrations of kind of visuals of what it's going to look like. And then I'm just looking forward to the mitigating, the negative declaration, just to see, because I too was concerned about just the impact of the wildlife. But overall, overarching, this is a very good project. I'm looking forward to hopefully making, going forward. But those are issues that I'm sure residents are going to want to see resolved at the hearing next month. So that's it. Thank you.
And we do have some photo simulations from across the eastern levee that we'll bring. I'll do some blow-ups to bring them in.
Perfect.
That'd be great, thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
Mr. Morzini has one more comment, and then I'll see if Mr. Galvin or Ms. Blackburn.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this, but when you were addressing Mr. Moore's questions about the 12 times the electricity consumed by the city of West Sacramento, maybe this is your statement of justification. You realize that 5,000 homes is not nearly 12 times the capacity that we're using.
Right.
I think our demand here in West Sacramento now is probably around 120 megawatts. And the development capacity of Southport is 19,000 homes. So it's a huge project for photovoltaic generation, but is in the scope of eliminating the need for any other generation in the area is not what you're trying to say here.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
And I think maybe that last statement, you might want to take another look at
Okay.
how you state that, because it is implying that it's going to provide 12 times as much power as we're using in the city, and I understand that's not what you intended to mean.
Any other comments? No? I have, I'm really excited about the project as well. I just had one question for Mr. Tilley regarding our serving as the lead agency. With regard to the county portions, I know sometimes easements, especially with mitigation preserves and so forth, are held by conservancies or land trusts. And is it clearly just the county land, or do we have other folks we need to involve, like the Yolo Land Trust, for example?
We have not engaged those entities. Even though these sites are located in the county, it still is all Port of West Sacramento owned property.
Okay,
And so, and early on, we did engage the county that this project was coming, and that we offered to assist them by serving in this role, and they have agreed to that, and we have that in writing from the county.
I was just, if there are other holders to the easements, I just want to make sure that those folks understand the project or can provide input to us. So if you've already worked with them, though, I'm assured that that's happening.
I would imagine there's an extensive permitting process, isn't there?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Bruce Barnett. I'm a consultant with OPDE. And you guys brought up a few things that, in terms of permitting and wildlife and all of that, and that's what I do. So we, in fact, did engage the Corps. They have an easement for the dredge spoils, and we received a letter from them, which is a consent to easement, and met with their biologist and their engineers to go over the project. And they wrote a letter to the port giving them the consent to operate within that easement and construct this project. So the Corps is fully engaged in this. We also have a permit in to the, what do they call it? It's an encroachment permit now with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. It used to be a different board, but now it's the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And they are currently, this is up for the board, I guess, for a board approval.
Being currently reviewed, the board has set staff that basically approved it, the Corps of Engineers for their final blessing, and then it will go to the rec board.
Right, rec board, that's right, it's not the rec board, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, they keep telling me to call them their new name. So those are the two permits that we needed. We needed to deal with the Corps, and we needed to deal with the Flood Protection Board. Those are happening. In terms of trees and wildlife, we did a pretty extensive work out there, and I was actually surprised to find out there was so much wildlife on these dredge spoils. There are several heron rookeries. There's a heron rookery in the north end, and we will be fencing that and putting a buffer in there so that we're appropriately far from that, especially during the breeding season before these birds fledge. So there should be no impact to that one. There's also a heron rookery in the south, on the base, on the western base of the levee. We'll be doing the same thing there, segregating that, avoiding that area, and we'll also be looking for the couple of pairs of burrowing owls that are out there. If in fact they are active at this point, we will avoid them until they fledge the young. Then we'll put one-way doors in there. and we'll get them out so that next year when they nest, they won't be nesting on top of the arrays, as per the California Department of Fish and Game guidelines. As far as garter snake goes, the giant garter snake, we are appropriately 200 feet from the habitat, which is essentially the channel, and then during the season, about 10 feet from that channel. They never venture more than 10 feet from the water during the summertime. During the wintertime, they tend to burrow under the ground. But since these are dredge spoil piles and the dredge keeps coming and going and there's nothing happening up there with the snakes. So we will be doing all of our appropriate pre-construction survey work. We'll be doing our monitoring work during the construction, and we will be doing post-construction compliance work with both the Army Corps and the Flood Protection Board. So we will be protecting everything that's out there and preventing any adverse impact on the wildlife or the species that occur there. And we will be making sure that we are not in violation of any law or regulation regarding wildlife impacts.
Thank you very much. And I imagine that'll be in the document, the negative deck document that we'll be receiving.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Did that stimulate other questions?
I have to ask one more.
Okay,
Since
Mr.
you bring
Morrison.
that up, then will the city have to participate in the habitat management conservation plan to provide offsetting locations for?
That's all going to be part of the Yolo County Habitat Conservation Plan. I mean, they're including these areas, especially the Fazio Wildlife Area in there. We will not really be impacting habitat to the extent the city's going to be responsible for anything. These are dredge spoil piles. So essentially, these are designed to lose spoil and gain spoil on a relatively regular basis. So it's very difficult for habitat to establish itself.
Yeah, I guess that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is there's a per acre fee for any developer that develops land in West Sacramento. And they are under the jurisdiction of that habitat management program. It's like
Well, that may be true, but
$8,000 an acre or something. My question has more to do with, is the city bound to participate or morally obligated to, because these arrays are occupying space that was habited by other animals. And if, as you go through the CEQA process, that question probably comes up, so maybe it's already been covered.
I think Dave, did you want to answer?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is the Swainson hawk foraging habitat, in lieu fee. And so
What triggered that was the garter snake. You mentioned the garter snake.
Yeah, and overall, the HCP is still under development, but there is an interim program as it pertains to Swainson hawk. Other species such as gray and garter snake still must follow the Fish and Wildlife Service protocols on that. And in this case, that's even sharply limits the time of year when they can actually do construction. It's May to October, I believe.
Yeah.
So
March 1 to October.
Yeah, so there is those issues certainly have been evaluated.
I'm done for good now.
Thank you, Mr. Morzini. All right, it looks like we've had a lot of input. I hope that it's helpful to you, Mr. Tilley, as you're preparing the next piece for us. It sounds like, because this is a conditional use permit, there's a bit more information and some visuals that we would like, and some suggestions as well. So with that, that brings us to, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That brings us to, let's see, I'll share that. Actually, this isn't on the agenda, but I don't think, oh, here it is. Thank you, sorry, it's on the second page. I'd like to inform folks that the public hearing is tentatively scheduled for July 15th, 2010 on this item. And that brings us to informal discussion. Just a reminder, as Mr. Riccola has shared, our July 1st meeting has been canceled, so the next time we'll see you is in about a month. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chairman, I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Lesma. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.